Watch this. If you feel behind in life, it will change everything. Stoic Breath to discover how Stoic wisdom can shift your mindset, reduce comparison, and help you build confidence through patience and discipline. This video reveals why feeling behind is often an illusion, and how steady effort can lead to lasting growth and inner strength. Subscribe to Stoic Breath now to receive powerful insights that help you stay focused, resilient, and in control of your life. There is a quiet kind of pain that many people carry and almost never talk about. It is the feeling that somehow life is moving forward for everyone else, but not for you. You look around and see promotions, weddings, new homes, growing families, public achievements, and suddenly your own path feels slower, smaller, almost invisible. And if you are not careful, you start believing a dangerous idea, that because your progress is not obvious, it must not be real. But Stoicism teaches something radically freeing. Life does not move according to one universal clock. There is no single timetable that every human being is required to follow. Your life has its own rhythm, its own seasons, its own pace of unfolding. And the moment you measure your journey against someone else's timeline, you trade peace for frustration. What truly matters is not whether you are arriving at the same place at the same time as others. What matters is whether you are honoring your own path with effort, discipline, patience, and presence. Every setback you have survived, every delay that forced you to grow stronger, every quiet season where it felt like nothing was happening may actually be the period where your foundation is being built. And foundations are rarely impressive from the outside. They are hidden. They are slow. They are silent. But they are what hold everything together when life gets heavy. Marcus Aurelius said that the obstacle in the path becomes the path. That means the thing making you feel delayed may be the very thing shaping your depth, your resilience, your wisdom, and your character. So feeling behind is not always truth. Very often, it is perception. It is the mind taking incomplete information and turning it into self-doubt. Because real progress is not only what can be posted, praised, or publicly recognized. Real progress is the inner work. It is the patience you are learning, the discipline you are practicing, the emotional strength you are building, the lessons you are absorbing in silence. The world may not applaud that. It may not even notice it. But that does not make it less real. And part of the reason this feeling runs so deep is because, for much of our early lives, we are taught to believe that progress is supposed to happen in a neat and predictable order. When we are young, life feels structured. We move from grade to grade, test to test, year to year. There is a system. There is a sequence. There are clear signs that tell us whether we are doing well. You pass, you move forward. You fail, you correct it. Everything feels contained, measurable, and somewhat fair. You begin to believe that life itself will continue to work that way. You expect there to be a path. And if you follow it correctly, you assume you will stay on schedule. That belief becomes so normal that most people never question it. But then adulthood arrives, and that structure disappears. Suddenly, the path splits in 100 directions. One friend gets married at 27. Another changes careers at 45. Someone buys a house early. Someone else starts over completely. One person seems to rise quickly in public, while another is quietly rebuilding after a loss nobody sees. And because the old rhythm is gone, the mind panics. It wants a ruler. It wants a schedule. It wants proof that you are still on track. But the Stoic view reminds us that the world is not judging you. Life itself is not declaring that you are late. That pain comes from the judgment you place on your own circumstances. It comes from deciding that someone else's milestone should also be yours. It comes from forgetting that human lives are not manufactured on an assembly line. They are lived through different challenges, different resources, different wounds, different opportunities, and different callings. That is why comparison is such a thief of peace. It tricks you into believing you are seeing the truth, when in reality you are only seeing the surface. A coworker gets recognized. A friend shares a major promotion. Someone else celebrates a personal win, and in an instant the mind reacts. It says, "Look where they are, and look where you are." But what it does not show you is the whole story. It does not show the years of rejection, the failures behind the smile, the sacrifices, the anxiety, the private battles, the lonely effort. Comparison is always incomplete. It focuses on outcomes instead of process, on appearances instead of substance. And in today's world, that distortion becomes even stronger because so much of what people see comes through curated moments, highlights, announcements, celebration posts, public victories, the polished parts of a life. But the hidden work that made those moments possible remains invisible. This is why so many people feel behind even when they are actually growing, because they are measuring their private reality against someone else's public highlight reel. Stoicism asks you to do something different. It asks you to return your attention inward, to stop asking, "How do I look compared to them?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming through this?" That question changes everything. Because when you focus on what is developing within you, you reclaim your power. You stop letting recognition decide your worth. You stop letting timing define your value. You stop believing that silence means failure. And you begin to understand that some of the most important growth in life happens when nothing looks impressive from the outside. Skill is being refined. Judgment is being strengthened. Endurance is being formed. Character is being tested and shaped. That is not stagnation. That is becoming. And once you see that clearly, the need to keep pace with everybody else begins to loosen its grip. You realize that the real goal was never to move at the speed of the crowd. The real goal was to move with integrity, clarity, and purpose on a path that is genuinely your own. That is the mindset Stoicism Breath stands for. Not panic, not comparison, not chasing the noise, but steady inner strength built one deliberate step at a time. What looks like a gap between you and others is often not a real gap at all. More often, it is a picture distorted by anxiety, expectation, and selective observation. Think about how the human brain naturally focuses on what is obvious and visible. We notice titles, promotions, celebrations, and achievements because they are loud and easy to see. But the truth is, progress rarely announces itself. It moves quietly beneath the surface. Skills sharpen little by little. Judgment becomes clearer over time. Resilience grows through repeated challenges. Perspective deepens through reflection. These invisible markers, ones that never trend on social media or get applause in public, are actually the true foundation behind every meaningful achievement. The strongest structures in the world are built underground first, long before anyone sees what rises above the surface. When attention shifts inward, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim control over how you interpret your life. Stoic philosophy reminds us that our internal state is sovereign. That means your worth is not determined by headlines, timelines, or external events unless you allow it to be. The quiet hours you spend learning, practicing, and improving, even when nobody notices, are not wasted time. They are the raw material of transformation. Think about someone learning a new skill, like improving their health, strengthening their body, or rebuilding their mindset after a setback. There are no fireworks in those early days. No applause. Just repetition, patience, and small adjustments. But those small adjustments, repeated over time, create dramatic results. These silent efforts, unseen workouts, disciplined routines, thoughtful reflection, are the true signals of progress, even when the outside world remains silent. The world itself does not push you forward, and it does not hold you back. It simply exists. What creates the feeling of being ahead or behind is not reality, it is interpretation. And when you learn to guide your interpretation wisely, you gain freedom. Comparison is dangerous because it disguises itself as logic. You look at someone else's results and assume you are seeing the full story. But what you see is only the final chapter, not the years of effort that came before it. Each life unfolds through a unique set of circumstances, different resources, different struggles, different starting points, and different turning moments. Yet many people try to measure every life using the same template, as if success should arrive at identical times for everyone. That belief is what creates unnecessary pressure and quiet frustration. Timing is never identical from one person to another. Some people begin with advantages. Others begin with obstacles. Some find opportunities early, while others build strength slowly over years of unseen work. Feeling behind is rarely evidence of failure. More often, it is the mind trying to simplify a complex reality into a single unfair comparison. But when you separate perception from fact, when you observe life without rushing to judge it, you begin to see something different. Progress is happening constantly, even when it feels slow. Every deliberate choice matters. Every small improvement adds up. Every moment of discipline strengthens the foundation beneath your future. Like muscles growing stronger through repeated effort, resilience builds quietly through consistent action. These kinds of changes do not always produce dramatic announcements. There is rarely a single moment where everything suddenly looks impressive. But that does not mean growth is absent. Marcus Aurelius once said that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. That statement carries a deep message. The way you think about your progress shapes how you experience your progress. Internal development, your patience, your discipline, your resilience, carries more weight than any visible signal. What the world sees is only the outer layer. What truly matters is the steady accumulation happening within you, layer by layer, day after day. Long-term growth is built through internal accumulation, skill, patience, endurance, and resilience. These qualities are not measured by applause, likes, or public milestones. They are measured by consistency. Imagine two people walking different paths. One appears successful early, gaining recognition quickly. The other moves slowly, practicing daily, refining their habits, strengthening their mindset. Years later, the second person often stands on a stronger foundation because their progress was built with intention, not urgency. When your attention shifts from comparison to deliberate effort, the feeling of being behind begins to fade. Each day of thoughtful action moves you forward, even if there is no visible scoreboard marking your progress. Progress is deeply personal. It is internal. It is enduring. And that is exactly what Stoicism Breath is about, choosing growth that lasts instead of chasing attention that fades. Surrounding yourself with ideas that sharpen your thinking, strengthen your character, and guide your decisions is not just motivation, it is a form of preparation. Each time you engage with meaningful reflection, you reinforce the values that shape long-term success. You begin to live more intentionally, choosing clarity over confusion and patience over panic. Life itself does not move in a straight, predictable line. It moves in curves, pauses, and unexpected turns. Some achievements appear immediate and visible, while others develop slowly beneath the surface. The mind has a natural habit of focusing only on what it can see, magnifying the visible wins of others while ignoring the quiet preparation happening in your own life. But every step you take, even the ones that feel small or unnoticed, adds to your strength. Each disciplined decision compounds into skill. Each lesson learned builds understanding. Over time, these small actions create powerful results that may not be obvious at first, but eventually become undeniable. The illusion of delay often begins when recognition becomes confused with achievement, when visibility becomes confused with worth. Many people assume that if no one sees their effort, that effort must not matter. But in reality, the most meaningful transformations happen quietly. A healthier body forms through daily habits. A stronger mindset develops through repeated discipline. A wiser perspective grows through reflection and patience. When perception shifts to honor this invisible work, something remarkable happens. Anxiety begins to fade, frustration softens, and patience takes its place. What once felt like stagnation begins to look like preparation. What once felt like delay begins to feel like incubation. And what once seemed like being left behind begins to reveal itself as steady, meaningful progress unfolding exactly as it should. True progress, according to Stoic wisdom, is not built on applause, recognition, or approval from the outside world. It is built on the quiet integrity of your actions and the honesty of your thoughts. Think about that for a moment. How often do people believe they are falling behind simply because no one is clapping for their effort? How often does the absence of praise feel like the absence of progress? But Stoicism teaches something far more grounded. Real growth begins the moment you stop waiting to be validated and start honoring the work happening inside you. When you shift your perception to value internal development, your patience, your discipline, your clarity, the feeling of being behind slowly dissolves. What once looked like stagnation starts to look different. It becomes preparation. It becomes incubation. It becomes strengthening. Just like muscles that grow during recovery, not during applause, the most powerful transformation often happens quietly, away from attention. And when you recognize this truth, something remarkable happens. Anxiety begins to fade. Frustration softens. Patience takes its place. You begin to move with intention instead of panic, with presence instead of pressure. When you learn to observe your life without constant judgment, a new kind of clarity appears. You start to notice something that was always there, but rarely acknowledged: the fact that your steps never truly stopped. Even in seasons that felt slow, something was happening. You were learning, adjusting, enduring, strengthening. The effort may have gone unnoticed by others, but it did not disappear. It accumulated. Like interest growing quietly in a bank account, unseen effort compounds over time. External markers, titles, praise, milestones, can be unreliable because they come and go. What remains is what you build inside yourself: virtue, wisdom, resilience. These are the assets that cannot be taken away, the qualities that stay long after applause fades. The Stoic mindset reminds us that measurement must be internal, not external. Instead of asking, "How far ahead am I compared to others?" the better question becomes, "How consistent am I with my own effort?" That shift alone reframes everything: how you see time, how you interpret struggle, how you define success. When you understand that each decision, each disciplined action, each lesson learned contributes to a path that belongs uniquely to you, the idea of being left behind begins to lose its power. There is no universal clock ticking against your worth. There is only the path you are shaping through your choices, one day at a time. And when attention is directed toward what you actually control, your thoughts, your habits, your reactions. The mind begins to settle. Peace becomes possible, not because the world changes, but because your interpretation of it becomes wiser. Feeling behind, then, is not a verdict. It is an invitation to pause, reflect, and reclaim control over how you judge your progress. Every unseen effort matters. Every quiet skill you develop matters. Every intentional decision matters. These are not small details. They are the evidence of growth. Stoicism reframes life not as a competition against others, but as a series of personal exercises, daily opportunities to practice resilience, patience, and clarity. When your focus returns to what lies within your control, effort, reflection, character, the illusion of being behind starts to break apart. You begin to realize that even the smallest step carries weight. That comparison, once seen as useful, is often nothing more than distortion. What appears to be delay is often the slow unfolding of competence and understanding, building strength layer by layer beneath the surface. Through this perspective, your path becomes continuous and purposeful. It is no longer defined by urgency or panic, but by alignment with principles that create lasting fulfillment. And yet, this realization is not always easy, because watching the lives of others unfold can cut deeper than we admit. Seeing someone else move forward quickly can make your own steps feel small or insignificant. It can create the illusion that your effort does not matter. But this reaction is not weakness, it is human nature. Psychologists have long explained that comparison is wired into the human brain. It is a survival shortcut, a way the mind tries to determine where you stand. But what begins as a natural instinct can easily turn into a harmful habit. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology. They warned that when attention drifts toward comparison, the mind loses direction. It becomes distracted, restless, and disconnected from purpose. Focusing on external achievements, promotions, awards, public successes, can turn life into a prison built from other people's milestones. You begin measuring your potential against standards that were never meant for you. And the danger is subtle, because visible success often looks convincing. It feels factual. A polished result looks like proof of superiority. But what you see is only a shadow cast on the wall. You see the finished outcome, not the exhaustion behind it. You see the reward, not the endurance. You see the recognition, not the sacrifice. This focus on appearances is deceptive precisely because it looks complete. But it is not. It hides the countless invisible moments, the failures corrected, the discipline practiced, the resilience built in silence. That is the part of growth most people never witness, yet it is the part that truly determines who endures and who fades. And this is the message that Stoicism Breath continues to reinforce. Lasting progress is not defined by what the world celebrates, but by what you quietly build within yourself, one disciplined choice at a time. Scroll through your phone for just a few minutes, and you will see it, highlight after highlight. A promotion celebrated with smiling photos. A brand new car parked in a driveway. A relationship milestone shared with perfect lighting and polished captions. At first glance, it feels inspiring. But if you stay there long enough, something subtle begins to happen inside your mind. Those images start to feel like evidence. Evidence that life is moving forward for everyone else on some invisible schedule. Evidence that there is a standard timeline you are supposed to follow. Yet what you are seeing are not full stories, they are fragments. Carefully chosen moments. Edited versions of reality that remove the struggle, erase the mistakes, and hide the long hours of effort that came before the celebration. What you don't see are the sleepless nights, the failed attempts, the uncertainty, the repetition, and the quiet resilience required to reach that moment. When your perception is limited to these narrow windows, feeling behind becomes almost unavoidable. It is not because you are actually falling behind. It is because your mind is comparing your full, unedited life to someone else's highlight reel. And when that happens, something even more dangerous occurs. You begin to give away your authority. You stop measuring your progress based on your own effort, and instead begin measuring it based on someone else's visibility. Slowly, your own life starts to feel smaller, not because it is, but because your attention has shifted away from it. The story you are living gets overshadowed by the story someone else is presenting. Even when that story is incomplete, filtered, or exaggerated, it still feels powerful enough to distort your self-worth. This constant recalibration, this habit of judging yourself against incomplete signals, creates tension inside the mind. You begin to measure your value by outcomes you cannot control. You begin to chase standards that were never designed for your path. And the emotional cost becomes obvious. Stress builds quietly. Envy creeps in unexpectedly. Frustration becomes familiar. Yet at the same time, something important gets ignored: the meaningful work already unfolding in your own life. Think about how often this happens. You complete something meaningful, maybe you improve your health, finish a project, or overcome a personal challenge. For a brief moment, you feel proud. Then you open your phone, see someone else's achievement, and suddenly that pride disappears. It fades, replaced by comparison. That shift is not reality, it is conditioning. It is the result of repeated exposure to selective images and a culture that equates visible success with real worth. Stoic thinkers would describe this as a misdirection of the mind, a confusion between what you control and what you do not. Events themselves are neutral. They carry no built-in judgment. What creates suffering is not the event, but the interpretation you assign to it. When recognition becomes the standard of success, anxiety becomes inevitable. But when attention is redirected inward, when you consciously decide where your focus belongs, the same situations that once caused tension begin to lose their power. Recognition from others stops feeling like the ultimate measure of growth. Instead, growth becomes defined by skill, character, and consistent effort. The scoreboard of life, in truth, is private. Its numbers are invisible to everyone but you. Real development happens in places that rarely attract attention. It happens in the early mornings when discipline replaces comfort. It happens in the quiet repetition of learning a new skill. It happens when patience is practiced instead of abandoned. These processes may appear slow, even static, to the outside world. But over time, they accumulate into something powerful. Imagine a tree growing underground before it ever breaks the surface. For months, sometimes years, nothing visible happens above the soil. Yet beneath the ground, roots spread deeper, stronger, more stable. When the tree finally emerges, its strength surprises everyone, but the real work was done long before it was seen. The same is true for the human mind and character. Growth often develops invisibly before it becomes undeniable. By turning attention inward, by measuring your progress against your own effort rather than against someone else's life, you reclaim authority over your direction. Growth becomes personal again. It becomes steady. It becomes meaningful. The feeling of being behind begins to weaken because the only timeline that matters is the one shaped by your daily actions. Your development finds its own rhythm, one that is independent of outside appearances and grounded in deliberate practice. What once felt like delay begins to look like preparation. What once felt invisible begins to feel foundational. The Stoic principle is simple but powerful. Internal mastery always comes before external validation. Society may reward what is visible, but visibility does not guarantee stability. A promotion may bring attention. A purchase may attract admiration. A public milestone may create applause. But none of these things automatically reveal depth, endurance, or resilience. They are surface-level indicators, useful but temporary. They can disappear just as quickly as they appear. Someone may look successful in public while struggling privately. Meanwhile, the effort you invest quietly continues to build strength beneath the surface. That is why relying on superficial measures to judge your progress can be so misleading. Comparison feeds anxiety because it prioritizes outcomes that are temporary instead of qualities that endure. It focuses on what is seen instead of what is being built. It measures what is displayed instead of what is being strengthened. But when you recognize this pattern, something liberating happens. You begin to understand that the metrics of other people's lives are not relevant to your own. Their pace is not your pace. Their milestones are not your milestones. Once attention returns to internal progress, to skill, discipline, and reflection, the mind begins to find a rhythm that feels sustainable. A rhythm built not on pressure, but on consistency. Not on urgency, but on resilience. And in that rhythm, the illusion of being behind slowly fades, replaced by the steady confidence that you are moving forward in the only way that truly matters, one deliberate step at a time. The illusion of being behind begins to fade the moment your attention turns inward, back to your own effort, your own growth, your own direction. When every small action is treated as meaningful, something shifts inside the mind. You start to realize that comparison itself is not harmless. It is a misplacement of attention. It pulls your focus outward, forcing you to measure your worth against signals that are unreliable and temporary. Social signals are fragments, not full realities. They are moments captured, filtered, and displayed, but rarely do they reflect the full journey behind them. When you return your attention to effort, reflection, and character, clarity begins to replace confusion. Peace begins to replace pressure. Real progress does not arrive loudly. It unfolds quietly, slowly, often invisibly. It shows up as stronger judgment, deeper resilience, and greater competence. And the truth is, no external appearance can ever fully capture the depth of your internal growth, nor should it be allowed to define how you see yourself. The Stoic path is built on a simple but powerful rule. Focus only on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses, and release the rest. When energy is invested into internal growth instead of external comparison, progress becomes durable. It becomes meaningful. It becomes something that cannot be shaken by someone else's success or slowed by someone else's timeline. What once felt like falling behind begins to transform into something entirely different, a steady accumulation of strength, wisdom, and presence. This kind of progress is invisible to most people, but deeply visible to the one living it. And that is enough. In this understanding, life is no longer measured by how fast others move, but by how consistently you move with purpose. Even the smallest daily choices begin to shape long-term outcomes. Think about the subtle habits that fill ordinary days. Endless scrolling through content. Delaying important tasks until tomorrow. Avoiding difficult conversations that require courage. Choosing comfort instead of challenge. These actions seem harmless in isolation, but repeated over time, they quietly build a pattern. They create the illusion that everything is fine as it is. They whisper the same message again and again. There is always more time. Growth can wait. Effort can be postponed. But the human brain is highly sensitive to repetition. Every time comfort is chosen over discipline, comfort becomes stronger. Every time challenge is avoided, courage becomes weaker. Over months and years, this pattern shapes an entire life, one where the familiar feels safer than growth, where routine becomes more comfortable than ambition, and where inaction slowly replaces purpose. This is the paradox of comfort. What feels safe in the moment often becomes the very thing that limits your potential. Comfort disguises itself as protection, but in reality, it can quietly shrink your capacity to grow. The danger is not in experiencing ease from time to time. Rest is necessary. Recovery is valuable. But the real threat lies in avoiding challenge altogether, in surrendering to what is easy simply because it feels good in the moment. Over time, this avoidance erodes your ability to act. It weakens your readiness to face difficulty. It makes the unknown feel threatening, even when it holds opportunity. Time reveals this paradox in powerful ways. A single day spent in routine comfort may seem harmless. A week spent avoiding effort may feel insignificant. But months and years built on those same choices create patterns that shape your future capacity. On the other hand, days spent confronting difficulty, even small ones, build endurance, sharpen insight, and strengthen skill. Effort compounds just as comfort compounds. One builds strength, the other builds stagnation. And often, the true cost of comfort is not visible until much later, when you look back and notice the opportunities never taken, the ideas never tested, the strength never developed. When the feeling of being behind appears, it is not always a sign of failure. More often, it is a signal inviting reflection, a signal asking where energy has been delayed, where courage has been postponed, where safety has replaced possibility. That awareness is powerful because it marks the beginning of change. It shifts life from passive living to deliberate action. Instead of drifting through routines, you begin to move intentionally. Instead of waiting for opportunity, you begin to create it. And in doing so, your trajectory changes, not overnight, but steadily. Feeling behind, then, should not be seen as misfortune. It should be recognized as feedback. It is life pointing toward unused potential. It is a reminder that growth is still available, waiting beneath habits of ease. It is an invitation for character to rise through effort. Often, the presence of comfort reveals exactly where challenge is needed. It shows the spaces where courage can grow, where discipline can take root, where strength can be built. When you face these moments quietly and consistently, when you choose effort over ease, action over delay, something remarkable begins to happen. What once felt like stagnation starts to reveal itself as preparation. What once felt like delay becomes incubation. What once felt like limitation transforms into opportunity. Every decision to resist unnecessary comfort reshapes your perception. It sharpens your ambition. It strengthens your sense of control over your life. And with each intentional step, the illusion of being behind fades further, replaced by the steady confidence that your progress is real, meaningful, and entirely your own. Growth rarely happens overnight. It does not appear instantly, and it is not always visible in the moment. Yet it is always cumulative. Every effort adds to the next. Every lesson strengthens what came before. And over time, those small, steady actions become durable and transformative. Feeling behind, in this sense, is not proof of failure, it is proof of awareness. It is the moment when you begin to recognize the difference between drifting through comfort and moving toward growth. Choosing effort over ease is not punishment. It is an investment. Think about how the body strengthens through repeated resistance. Muscles do not grow because of comfort. They grow because of challenge. In the same way, the mind becomes stronger when it is disciplined, when it practices patience, when it faces difficulty instead of avoiding it. Over time, this discipline changes how you see time itself. Progress is no longer measured by applause or recognition, but by effort, skill, and resilience quietly built day after day. When struggle is embraced deliberately, something powerful happens. What once felt like delay begins to transform into preparation. What once felt like limitation becomes strength in development. Comfort, which once felt safe, reveals itself as something that can quietly hold you back if left unchecked. But when you shift your perspective, you begin to see struggle not as an enemy, but as training. Perspective becomes the antidote to envy. The moment you understand that visible success does not guarantee inner peace, your entire way of thinking begins to change. Someone else may appear to be moving faster, achieving more, living more visibly, but appearances do not reveal the state of the inner life. External milestones can come at a cost. Peace may be sacrificed. Integrity may be compromised. Wisdom may be neglected. It is entirely possible to reach impressive goals while feeling empty inside. And yet, the opposite is also true. Slow progress, quiet discipline, and unseen effort often produce a deep sense of fulfillment that no public recognition can match. Carl Jung once reflected on the idea that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That statement carries a powerful message for anyone who feels left behind. The true measure of life is not how you compare to others, but how authentically you grow into your own character. The achievements of someone else may look appealing from a distance, but they may not align with your values, your purpose, or your direction. What matters most is not the distance someone else has traveled, but whether your own path leads to depth, meaning, and resilience. When this realization takes root, your behavior begins to change. Instead of reacting to what others are doing, you act with intention. Instead of chasing comparison, you step off the treadmill entirely. Effort becomes your measurement. Consistency becomes your evidence. Patience becomes your advantage. Every deliberate action, no matter how small, contributes to long-term development. One disciplined decision today strengthens tomorrow. One moment of reflection builds wisdom that lasts years. Yet, when attention is fixed on the visible achievements of others, distraction follows. Dissatisfaction grows. You begin to forget that life is lived from within, not displayed as snapshots on a screen. Those snapshots may look impressive, but they are incomplete stories. They hide the doubt, the fatigue, and the sacrifices that shape the visible result. When you begin to value internal growth over external recognition, your standards change. Success becomes something personal, something resilient against envy, pressure, and social comparison. You begin to see that life contains hidden dimensions, layers of effort and resilience that rarely appear on the surface. And understanding those hidden dimensions changes how you interpret your own progress. The person who seems far ahead of you may be carrying burdens you cannot see. Their achievements may require sacrifices you would never choose. They may be pursuing goals that do not match your purpose or values. Once you recognize this, comparison begins to lose its grip. Anxiety begins to fade. Judgment begins to loosen. Growth becomes your focus instead of visibility. Effort, integrity, patience, and reflection become the true indicators of advancement, regardless of whether anyone else notices. The gap that once seemed so large often turns out to be an illusion created by focusing on appearances rather than substance. It is the difference between watching the final scene of a story and understanding the entire journey behind it. Freedom begins when attention shifts inward. When you stop measuring yourself against external timelines and begin measuring yourself against your own effort, something changes. Happiness, fulfillment, and mastery no longer depend on imitation or competition. They grow from alignment with your values, your character, and your purpose. Stoicism reinforces this idea by teaching a simple discipline. Focus on what you can control and release what you cannot. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, these are yours to shape. Everything else belongs to the world, and the world will always remain unpredictable. But when you commit to cultivating skill, resilience, and character, progress becomes inevitable. Not rushed, not forced, but steady, meaningful, and deeply your own. External signals, titles, awards, public milestones, are things you cannot fully control. They depend on timing, opportunity, and the judgment of others. But your effort, your decisions, your growth, those are always within your control. And the moment you truly understand that distinction, anxiety begins to lose its grip. The fear of appearing behind starts to fade because you realize that appearances were never the true measure in the first place. What really matters is not whether you look ahead or behind compared to someone else. What matters is the depth of your effort, the consistency of your actions, and the alignment between what you value and how you live. When attention shifts in that direction, satisfaction becomes more stable, less dependent on outside approval, and more rooted in your own daily discipline. The mind that constantly measures itself against others slowly gives away its independence. It becomes reactive instead of deliberate. But the person who chooses internal standards, who measures progress by effort, resilience, and learning, reclaims control over their own life. They stop chasing fleeting validation and start building something durable. Over time, the advantages that once seemed impressive in others begin to look different. You begin to see the trade-offs hidden beneath the surface, the sacrifices, the compromises, the stress that often accompany visible success. Perspective sharpens into clarity. Observation becomes discernment. Life stops feeling like a race and begins to feel like cultivation, a steady investment into wisdom, resilience, skill, and values that actually matter. What once felt like envy can transform into reflection. Instead of wishing for someone else's outcomes, you begin to ask deeper questions. Does their path match your values? Does their lifestyle reflect the kind of life you truly want? This shift frees the mind from distraction. It allows action to align with purpose instead of pressure. And in that alignment, struggle begins to take on a new meaning. Struggle is no longer seen as an interruption of life. It becomes evidence that life is being lived fully. The discomfort you feel when pushing yourself, the resistance you encounter while learning something new, the frustration that comes from effort, these are not signs of failure. They are proof that your mind and body are engaged, that you are participating in growth even when results are not immediately visible. To face discomfort directly is to participate in reality instead of hiding from it. Every challenge, every obstacle, every moment that tests your patience or endurance is a signal that you are present in the arena of life. It is easy to mistake struggle for weakness, to assume that hardship means something is wrong. But that interpretation is misleading. Stoic thinkers understood that adversity is not an accident, it is a natural part of existence. Character is not built in comfort. It is shaped through intentional engagement with difficulty. Every time effort meets resistance, you are given a chance to sharpen judgment, build resilience, and strengthen character. The friction that comes from meaningful effort strengthens the mind in ways that comfort never can. When life feels easy, growth slows. But when effort meets challenge, the mind develops new capacities: problem solving, patience, adaptability. Facing difficulty requires courage because the natural instinct of the human mind is to avoid discomfort. Humans are wired to seek safety, predictability, and ease. And when fear appears, hesitation often follows. But avoidance, over time, becomes a silent limitation. It shrinks potential and weakens confidence. Discomfort, on the other hand, carries lessons that comfort never provides. It demands attention. It sharpens awareness. It forces growth in ways that convenience never will. Every setback faced directly builds strength for the future. The mind that learns to tolerate difficulty develops judgment and problem-solving abilities that remain unavailable to those who only seek comfort. By stepping into the arena, by choosing action over avoidance, you reclaim your sense of agency. You build competence. You begin to understand that adversity is not punishment, it is training. It is preparation for the challenges that inevitably lie ahead. Struggle is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of presence. It shows that you are participating fully in your own life rather than standing on the sidelines. To engage fully with life means accepting risk, uncertainty, and the possibility of failure. It means choosing meaningful experiences instead of safe routines. Theodore Roosevelt once described this idea as being in the arena, a place where effort meets reality, where your face may be marked by dust and sweat, but where growth truly happens. That image captures something essential. Effort must meet life directly. There is no other way to develop real strength. While the external world can never be completely controlled, deliberate action within it creates growth. Every difficult conversation, every professional challenge, every personal setback becomes a training ground for stronger judgment and wiser action. Progress, then, cannot be measured only by visible results. It must also be measured by what is developing beneath the surface: patience, clarity, resilience, and adaptability. These qualities remain steady even when circumstances change. Being present in the arena of life signals something powerful. You are living intentionally, not reacting passively. You are transforming challenges into tools. You are turning resistance into strength. And through that process, insight begins to deepen. Participation in life's challenges is inseparable from preparation for the future. Every obstacle you overcome, every effort you sustain, every moment you refuse to quit becomes part of a reserve you will draw from later. Skills accumulate. Confidence builds. Resilience strengthens. The endurance you cultivate today becomes the strength you rely on tomorrow. Struggle compounds just like progress. What you face now prepares you for what lies ahead. And over time, this steady engagement with difficulty becomes the very force that transforms uncertainty into capability, fear into confidence, and effort into lasting growth. When the mind becomes accustomed to engaging with challenges instead of avoiding them, something remarkable begins to happen. It becomes more flexible, more composed, and far more capable of observing situations without reacting impulsively. Over time, resilience strengthens, judgment sharpens, and emotional stability grows. The discomfort that once felt threatening no longer appears as something to escape, but something to navigate with awareness. In this way, struggle stops feeling like proof of failure and begins to look like evidence of investment, an active commitment to developing the abilities that lead to achievement, wisdom, and self-mastery. Think about any skill worth having, whether it is improving your physical health, learning a new profession, or rebuilding your confidence after a setback. None of these are built in comfort. They are built through repeated effort, through moments of friction that gradually strengthen your capacity to handle life with greater skill. Psychologically, the way you interpret struggle determines how it shapes your future. Two people can face the same difficulty, yet experience completely different outcomes. One sees hardship as punishment and feels defeated. The other sees hardship as training and becomes stronger. The difference is not the challenge itself, it is perception. When difficulty is embraced deliberately, it becomes transformative rather than destructive. Temporary discomfort begins to produce lasting growth. Every time you choose to stay engaged instead of withdrawing, you reinforce internal strength. Your judgment improves. Your emotional reactions become steadier. Confidence builds quietly in the background. On the other hand, when the mind labels every challenge as catastrophe, stress rises. Anxiety grows. Productivity weakens. But when adversity is reframed as a natural part of living intentionally, energy shifts. Fear loses control. Effort becomes purposeful. And the process reinforces itself. The more you face difficulty consciously, the more capable you become of facing the next challenge with calm and clarity. The presence of struggle, then, is not a sign that life is going wrong. It is evidence that you are participating in your own life instead of watching it pass by. Every failure you encounter, every obstacle that blocks your path, every moment when doubt creeps in, these are signals of engagement, not weakness. To step into difficulty is to claim ownership of your life. It is to develop competence through action, to accumulate wisdom through experience. Stoic philosophy teaches that life is not meant for passive spectators. It is meant for deliberate action, thoughtful reflection, and steady growth. Every challenge you endure, every discomfort you tolerate, every risk you take, these are signs that you are living fully. They are markers of progress measured not by comparison with others, but by the development of your own inner strength. Yet the mind often misinterprets this entire process. In a culture that values instant gratification and visible success, patience can feel unnatural. Effort that produces no immediate reward can feel pointless. Hours spent practicing in silence may feel wasted simply because there is no applause at the end of the day. Social comparison intensifies this feeling. You see someone else advancing, receiving recognition, reaching milestones, while your own preparation remains invisible. It creates the illusion that nothing is happening, even when progress is quietly unfolding beneath the surface. But the Stoic perspective reminds us that what is unseen is often more valuable than what is displayed. External success is temporary. It may feel satisfying in the moment, but it fades. The competence developed through steady effort, however, remains. Resilience stays. Judgment strengthens. These qualities endure long after recognition fades. The feeling of delay is often nothing more than the natural waiting period required for growth to mature. Skill takes time to incubate. Strength develops gradually. Progress is happening even when it cannot yet be measured externally. The real challenge lies in maintaining focus while the results are still invisible. Consider the athlete training in silence. Day after day, repetition follows repetition. Each drill feels routine. Each correction seems small. There are no crowds watching. No headlines announcing effort. But those unseen hours form the base for performance under pressure. They build endurance, speed, and confidence long before the competition begins. The same principle applies to the artist who spends months refining a single technique. To an outsider, it may look repetitive or unproductive. But each adjustment sharpens precision. Each repetition deepens mastery. Over time, the results become undeniable, not because of sudden luck, but because of sustained effort. Think also of the thinker or student who studies patiently, testing ideas, reflecting on mistakes, learning from experience. The insight gained through that quiet work becomes a powerful tool, guiding decisions in ways that others may never notice, but that produce meaningful results over time. In every case, the visible achievement is only the surface. Beneath it lies a foundation built through persistence and patience. Ultimately, the work itself, the quiet, consistent effort, is the true measure of progress. Recognition from others is neither necessary nor sufficient to validate your growth. Stoicism teaches that the process is what matters most. Outcomes are reflections of effort, not guarantees of worth. Many people feel anxious because their perception does not match reality. They assume that visible results are the only signs of advancement. But reality is far more complex. Progress is often silent before it becomes visible. Growth is often hidden before it becomes undeniable. And once you begin to trust that process, the anxiety created by comparison begins to fade. Instead of chasing approval, you focus on cultivation, on building strength, refining judgment, and developing the resilience needed to move forward with clarity and confidence. The human mind naturally gravitates toward comparison. It looks for numbers, milestones, and visible proof, things that can be measured and displayed. Without those markers, effort can begin to feel meaningless, as if time is slipping away without reward. You might spend hours learning, practicing, or improving, yet feel as though nothing is happening simply because there is no immediate recognition. That is when the sense of being behind begins to grow. But this perception is flawed. What feels like delay is often preparation. It is a quiet incubation period where competence, judgment, and character are taking shape beneath the surface. Just as seeds remain hidden underground before breaking through the soil, growth often begins long before it becomes visible. This is why lasting success rarely happens overnight. The people who achieve meaningful, enduring results almost never do so through sudden bursts of inspiration alone. Their strength is built gradually, layer by layer, through consistent effort over long periods of time. Skills sharpen through repetition. Insight deepens through reflection. Resilience forms through repeated exposure to challenge. The person who understands this process develops patience, not the kind that waits passively, but the kind that trusts steady work. Confidence grows from knowing that progress does not always announce itself. Perspective strengthens when you realize that what looks like stagnation is often deliberate accumulation. Consider the simple actions that fill an ordinary day. Reading not just to finish pages, but to truly understand ideas. Writing not just to produce words, but to clarify thoughts. Practicing a skill repeatedly, even when improvement seems slow. Engaging in thoughtful conversations that challenge assumptions and expand awareness. Each of these activities may seem minor when viewed alone. They may even feel unproductive in the moment. But their combined effect is powerful. Like drops of water shaping stone over time, small consistent actions reshape the mind and body in lasting ways. The patience developed through repetition strengthens focus. The body conditioned through effort becomes more capable. The judgment refined through reflection becomes sharper and more reliable. Even if the outside world does not recognize the progress immediately, the internal transformation is profound. Stoic philosophy teaches that mastery begins within. Visible outcomes, titles, praise, recognition, are secondary. The real measure of progress is skill development, clarity of thought, and strength of character. There is also a powerful psychological effect in recognizing the value of unseen work. Those who appreciate their internal development naturally build focus, discipline, and perseverance. They understand that external validation is inconsistent. It comes and goes, often unpredictably. But internal growth remains steady. This mindset protects against impatience, comparison, and distraction. By valuing the process more than the result, effort becomes aligned with principle. Direction remains steady, even when the path ahead looks uncertain. This is the heart of Stoic practice, paying attention to what lies within your control while releasing attachment to what does not. Skill must be cultivated deliberately. Virtue must be practiced consistently. External markers, while satisfying, are never fully reliable indicators of progress. The feeling of being behind often comes from impatience, not from reality. It arises when timing is misunderstood, when the natural rhythm of development is ignored. No meaningful ability appears instantly. Preparation always comes before performance. The disciplined mind learns to respect this delay. It understands that every repetition, every correction, every small success contributes to something larger. External outcomes will eventually reflect the preparation happening beneath the surface, but the work itself must be valued independently of recognition. This realization allows persistence without anxiety. It allows you to continue learning, practicing, and refining even when results are not immediately visible. This is the defining principle of mastery: patience, consistency, and trust in the process. Marcus Aurelius once suggested that happiness, like skill, is cultivated internally. It does not depend on applause or public approval. It grows from the way you think, the way you act, and the way you interpret your progress. As competence grows, so does internal satisfaction. Not because others recognize your effort, but because you recognize your own progress. Hours spent practicing, reflecting, and improving become investments in your future capability. The mind that values unseen accumulation becomes aligned with purpose. Effort becomes intentional. Delays become understandable. Growth becomes meaningful. Instead of feeling anxious about what has not yet happened, you begin to trust what is already being built. Feeling behind, in this context, transforms into something entirely different. It becomes recognized as the natural pace of growth, slow, steady, and deeply transformative. The world may only see the final result, the visible outcome that appears suddenly after years of effort. But what truly matters is the cultivation beneath the surface, the invisible labor that builds endurance, skill, and wisdom. Life does not move in straight, predictable lines. The calendar may measure days and months, but growth measures effort, resilience, and patience. And those who understand this truth stop fearing delay and start honoring the process that makes lasting progress possible. The calendar marks days, weeks, and years, but those numbers are human inventions. They are tools for organization, not true measures of your progress, your worth, or your potential. Stoic thinkers understood something many people forget: external timing is indifferent. It does not define you. What truly matters is what you build during the time, the endurance you develop, the persistence you practice, and the character you strengthen when uncertainty shows up. Think about how often people feel pressure simply because they believe they should have reached a certain milestone by a certain age. But life does not follow a universal script. Progress is not dictated by a clock. It is shaped by effort repeated consistently over time. Some people seem to sprint ahead early in life. They reach visible milestones quickly: career success, financial growth, public recognition. Others move quietly, building their abilities away from attention. To the outside world, the difference can look dramatic. But what many fail to understand is that long-term success is rarely determined by how fast someone starts. It is determined by how consistently someone continues. Effort, practice, discipline, and resilience accumulate in ways that are often invisible at first. The world tends to measure what it can see: titles, awards, applause, but the real forces behind success are hidden beneath the surface. Preparation, adaptability, endurance, and judgment, these qualities grow slowly and steadily, shaping outcomes that eventually emerge in their own time. External recognition can be misleading because it tells only part of the story. It highlights achievements but hides preparation. It celebrates results but ignores the resilience required to produce them. When you compare yourself to someone else's early success, it is tempting to assume they are permanently ahead while you are somehow delayed. But that assumption overlooks the invisible elements behind their progress. The circumstances they faced, the sacrifices they made, the failures they endured, these are rarely visible. What you see is the result, not the journey that produced it. Persistence, especially when practiced quietly, compounds over time just like interest in a bank account. Each day of effort adds strength. Each challenge faced adds skill. Each lesson learned sharpens judgment. At first, the growth may feel slow. It may even feel invisible. But over months and years, the results become undeniable. Life is not a collection of short races judged by immediate applause. It is a long-distance journey, a marathon of character, where consistency matters more than speed and endurance matters more than visibility. When you begin to internalize this perspective, the fear of being late begins to dissolve. The pressure to keep up with others fades. In its place comes a deeper understanding. Progress is not about timing, it is about engagement. It is about showing up daily, even when recognition is absent. It is about building virtues that endure long after applause fades. Life moves in cycles, not straight lines. Results rarely come from one single burst of effort. They come from the steady accumulation of many small, intentional actions repeated over time. Think about what happens during those days when nothing seems to change. You read, reflect, practice, and adjust, yet the outcome remains invisible. It can feel discouraging. But those quiet periods are not empty. They are incubation phases. They are the time when competence deepens, judgment sharpens, and resilience strengthens. Consider the athlete who trains alone before sunrise, repeating drills without an audience. The writer who rewrites the same paragraph again and again, searching for clarity. The thinker who studies patiently, exploring ideas long before sharing them. These individuals understand something powerful. Effort accumulates even when results remain unseen. Success, in truth, is rarely sudden. It is built gradually through persistence, repetition, and continued engagement with difficulty. The outside world may remain indifferent to your progress for a long time. It may not acknowledge your effort or recognize your preparation. But the mind that understands the value of consistent effort develops patience. It develops foresight. It develops emotional balance. These qualities allow you to continue moving forward without panic, without comparison, and without losing faith in the process. Over time, this steady approach reshapes how you experience life itself. Instead of rushing to match someone else's pace, you begin to honor your own rhythm. Instead of fearing delay, you begin to trust preparation. Instead of chasing visible milestones, you focus on strengthening the foundation beneath them. And when the results finally appear, as they inevitably do, they often surprise even you, not because they happened suddenly, but because they were built patiently, step by step, long before anyone else noticed. Endurance becomes a far more reliable measure of progress than any scoreboard the world can offer. Character becomes the true indicator of achievement, not titles, not applause, not public milestones. The illusion of being late or somehow deficient often begins when progress is judged by visibility rather than substance. The mind naturally looks for signals, numbers, recognition, feedback that appears instantly. It wants confirmation that effort is working. But those signals are incomplete. External validation fades quickly. It gives only a snapshot, never the full picture. And when life is measured by snapshots alone, frustration grows because the deepest forms of progress rarely appear in a single frame. Stoicism offers a different standard, one that is internal, steady, and dependable. The real measure of growth lies in effort guided by principle, skill developed through patience, and character strengthened through reflection and persistence. When attention moves away from comparing yourself to others, something powerful happens. Anxiety loses its grip. Envy weakens. Distraction fades into the background. What once looked like falling behind begins to look different. It becomes preparation. Necessary preparation. The kind that builds strength before opportunity arrives. The kind that prepares you for moments that cannot be predicted but must be faced with readiness. Every day of consistent action, even the quiet ones that go unnoticed, creates change beneath the surface. Judgment becomes sharper. Resilience becomes stronger. Confidence grows not from praise, but from repetition. Think of planting a seed in the ground. On the surface, nothing appears to happen for days, weeks, even months. Yet beneath the soil, roots are forming, spreading, strengthening. The absence of visible growth does not mean the absence of progress. It simply means development is taking place where it cannot yet be seen. This principle applies to every area of life, whether learning a new skill, strengthening emotional discipline, improving physical health, or developing creative mastery. Persistence becomes the vehicle that transforms potential into capability. The person who understands this begins to develop patience, not passive waiting, but active trust in the process. Perspective improves because expectations become realistic. Confidence grows because effort becomes meaningful regardless of immediate results. The illusion of being late fades when time is understood properly. Growth does not follow a fixed schedule. It follows cycles of preparation, effort, and refinement. Many people feel behind simply because they misunderstand this natural rhythm. They expect instant outcomes from long-term investments, and when results do not appear immediately, doubt begins to grow. But once the relationship between effort and time is understood, delay no longer feels threatening. It becomes part of the design. Every individual path unfolds differently because every life is shaped by unique circumstances. Resources differ. Opportunities vary. Preparation happens at different speeds. Resilience develops in different ways. Comparing your journey to someone else's ignores these invisible factors. It creates a distorted view of progress. The person who appears ahead may have benefited from timing or circumstances that cannot be repeated. Meanwhile, the path that seems slower may be building strength, insight, and adaptability that lead to deeper success later. When the mind values process over appearance, persistence over urgency, and internal development over external recognition, clarity replaces confusion. Effort becomes purposeful instead of reactive. Every action taken with consistency compounds into something larger. Even when recognition arrives later than expected, the investment remains. Life often rewards those who stay aligned with principle, regardless of how long results take to appear. External recognition may lag behind effort. Results may remain hidden for extended periods. But the individual who practices patience and consistency develops qualities that endure: competence, resilience, and strength of character. These qualities cannot be taken away by changing circumstances or fading attention. Progress measured internally rises above superficial standards created by comparison or social expectation. The belief that you are late or behind begins to dissolve when you understand that life unfolds in cycles, not straight lines. Persistence compounds. Effort builds momentum. Character becomes the foundation that supports every achievement. When effort remains steady and aligned with values, the illusion of delay fades into clarity. The path becomes clearer, not because challenges disappear, but because purpose becomes stronger. Adversity, instead of being an obstacle, becomes a proving ground. It is where endurance is tested and refined. It is where insight develops. Each challenge faced strengthens judgment. Each difficulty encountered sharpens awareness. Over time, adversity stops feeling like a barrier and begins to feel like training. The person who learns to endure learns to grow. And the person who learns to grow through difficulty develops a level of strength that no external approval could ever replace. Every difficulty that enters your life carries more than inconvenience. It carries opportunity. An opportunity to practice patience when frustration rises. An opportunity to exercise self-control when emotions threaten to take over. An opportunity to show courage when avoidance feels easier than action. The person who faces adversity consciously, who pauses instead of reacting impulsively, who leans into discomfort instead of running from it, builds strength that lasts far beyond the moment itself. Challenges that once looked overwhelming begin to look different over time. They become chapters in a larger story of growth. What once felt like failure begins to reveal itself as engagement, as proof that you were present, learning, adapting, and evolving. Stoic philosophy places control where it truly belongs, within the individual. It teaches that life is not defined by events themselves, but by how those events are interpreted and handled. Two people may face the same uncertainty, the same setback, the same unexpected turn, yet walk away with entirely different outcomes. The difference lies in internal orientation. The way you approach discomfort, uncertainty, and unfamiliar territory becomes the real measure of progress, far more meaningful than any comparison made by others. Persistence in obscurity, when no one is watching, becomes one of the greatest teachers of character. Many of the most meaningful gains in life happen quietly, without recognition or applause. They occur in moments that feel ordinary, even unnoticed. Think about the long evenings spent practicing something new, the early mornings spent building discipline, the repeated efforts that seem to bring no immediate reward. The mind often wants visible proof that progress is happening. It wants recognition. It wants feedback. But true development, real skill, strong character, and lasting resilience rarely announces itself. It grows silently. Each deliberate decision, each disciplined repetition, each challenge faced without retreat quietly strengthens judgment and competence. Over time, those quiet efforts accumulate. Like layers of stone forming a mountain, each small act adds weight and structure. Eventually, internal strength begins to show externally, but often in ways that cannot be predicted. Patience, in this sense, is not passive waiting. It is active participation. It is the willingness to continue showing up, continuing to learn, continuing to improve, even when results remain invisible. The individual who remains committed in private, The one who continues practicing routines, refining habits, and enduring repetition without applause, develops abilities that the world may not yet recognize, but will eventually respect. Feeling behind, then, is rarely evidence of failure. More often, it is a misinterpretation of slow, deliberate progress. It is the result of focusing on visible outcomes while ignoring invisible preparation. Internal resilience becomes the true foundation of a meaningful life. It is the capacity to remain steady when hardship appears, to stay balanced when uncertainty rises, and to move forward with clarity even when the path is unclear. External measures, wealth, recognition, titles, can shift quickly. They can disappear, change, or lose their meaning. But resilience built through consistent effort remains stable. It strengthens with time. It reinforces itself through repeated action. This kind of resilience allows you to engage with life proactively instead of reactively. Decisions become guided by principles rather than emotions. Actions become thoughtful instead of rushed. Over time, these deliberate choices shape not only outcomes but identity itself. The story of your life is not written by circumstance alone. It is written by how consistently you engage with each moment, how carefully you respond to each challenge, how faithfully you continue even when progress is slow. Internal development is permanent in ways external achievements are not. External conditions shift constantly. Opportunities change. Recognition fades. Circumstances evolve. But the skills you build, the lessons you learn, and the character you cultivate remain with you. The sense of being behind often comes from looking outward instead of inward. It grows when attention focuses on someone else's timeline rather than your own path. Comparison hides the value of effort already invested. It blinds you to lessons gained through struggle and to growth formed in silence. Life unfolds according to deliberate action, not according to external schedules. The individual who anchors decisions in values, effort, and discipline experiences progress regardless of outside measurement. What goes unnoticed today may become the very foundation of tomorrow's success. Effort that feels invisible now may produce strength that becomes unmistakable later. Stoicism teaches that true control lies in daily choices, in the cultivation of wisdom, judgment, and virtue. When this perspective is embraced, the illusion of being behind begins to dissolve. Effort becomes aligned with meaningful progress instead of superficial signals. And every response to adversity becomes more than survival. It becomes an act of character formation, shaping a life defined not by comparison, but by strength built from within. Choosing reflection instead of reaction changes the direction of a life in ways most people do not notice at first. Choosing patience instead of impatience builds strength that lasts far longer than any short-term reward. Choosing persistence instead of surrender shapes character in ways that remain long after circumstances change. Over time, it is not the number of achievements you collect that determines your path. It is the number of deliberate choices you make when things are difficult. Feeling behind is temporary. It is tied to perception and comparison. But preparation, patience, and intentional effort become permanent parts of who you are. They settle into your habits, into your thinking, into the way you respond to life. Each thoughtful decision strengthens judgment. Each moment of discipline reinforces resilience. Each effort made with intention contributes to a life that feels meaningful rather than rushed or scattered. What looks like delay or misalignment often turns out to be preparation. Growth does not happen in straight lines. It unfolds through cycles of effort, reflection, and adjustment. Stoic philosophy reminds us that the most valuable abilities are the ones that remain steady even when the world changes. Clarity, patience, self-control, and resilience. These qualities cannot be taken away by shifting circumstances because they are built internally. Life's story is not defined by how it begins, but by how it ends. A slow start does not determine the outcome. A difficult season does not define the entire journey. Periods that feel uncertain or delayed do not diminish your potential. What matters most is how you continue, how you respond to setbacks, how you maintain integrity, and how you keep moving forward when progress feels slow. Every decision to act deliberately, to improve your skills, to practice patience, and to remain committed becomes part of the larger picture of your life. Like brushstrokes on a canvas, these choices shape the final image long before it is visible. Progress, at its core, is internal. It accumulates gradually and strengthens over time. It is measured by how closely your actions align with your values, by how steady your character remains under pressure, and by how much insight you gain through experience. External milestones may be visible, but they are secondary. Internal development is primary. The rhythm of life is created by engagement, not appearance. It is defined by showing up daily, not by being seen occasionally. Epictetus once taught that it is not what happens to you that matters, but how you respond to it. That simple idea captures the essence of true progress. Events themselves are often outside your control. Challenges will appear without warning. Circumstances will change without permission. But your response, your mindset, your discipline, your persistence remains yours to shape. When obstacles arise, they do not have to become barriers. They can become training grounds. They can sharpen awareness, strengthen determination, and build confidence. Every choice aligned with your principles adds strength to your character. Each moment of deliberate effort builds competence. Each challenge faced with patience reinforces resilience. The feeling of being behind begins to fade when attention shifts back to what you control. Preparation replaces panic. Patience replaces frustration. Action replaces doubt. Your life begins to move according to courage and discipline rather than fear and comparison. The external world will always present distractions. There will always be examples of success that appear faster, bigger, and more visible than your own. There will always be moments that tempt comparison. But these signals do not define your progress. They are temporary. The person who builds skill, cultivates virtue, and strengthens resilience learns to navigate life intentionally. They measure progress internally, not externally. They interpret challenges as opportunities, not punishments. Over time, this mindset transforms how life is experienced. Feeling behind becomes temporary. Character becomes lasting. Preparation and persistence create momentum that cannot be easily stopped. Effort applied consistently builds results that grow steadily, even when they are not immediately visible. Your progress does not depend on applause. It does not rely on timelines created by others. It follows the rhythm of your own engagement, how consistently you act, how faithfully you practice, how intentionally you live. Alignment between effort and principle becomes the true measure of success, far more meaningful than any public recognition. At the end of the day, life is not defined by how quickly others move or by the milestones they display. It is defined by the courage shown in quiet moments. It is defined by the effort invested when no one is watching. It is defined by the patience practiced while growth unfolds slowly beneath the surface. Every setback faced, every difficulty endured, every deliberate choice made becomes part of your story. And that story belongs to you alone. The path forward unfolds according to persistence, not applause. Continue moving forward, even when progress feels slow. Continue showing up, even when recognition is absent. And when you pause to reflect, notice how much strength you have already built, how many lessons you have learned, how much resilience you have developed. The journey itself becomes the reward when you trust the process. If this message resonates, continue exploring ideas that strengthen your mindset and sharpen your discipline. Stoicism Breath exists to guide that journey, to help you think more clearly, act more deliberately, and live with intention. Your presence here is not accidental. It is a step toward mastering your thoughts, your choices, and ultimately your life.